Well,
They're just so stupid, these people. Don't they realize, like, give it up. What are you trying to accomplish? Okay, so the general rule that we saw yesterday as far as taking something from someone else without their permission, is it considered geneva or not? So klalo shel davar im haba'olim yargishu b'geneva. Oh, and then the question becomes, what if I pay for it? Can I take something from someone and then pay for it? Im haba'olim yargishu b'geneva, mutar liknot mehem, vim lav asur liknot. So if the owner will be aware that the commodity that I'm purchasing without their knowledge is missing, then I'm allowed to purchase it from, let's say, a representative. So the example that we gave was, let's say a guy's hired to be a shepherd of a flock of sheep. He's not authorized to sell, at least I don't know if he's authorized to sell or not. But if he offers to sell me an amount that is so significant from the flock that the owner will know about it, then I'm allowed to assume that he's an authorized seller. Because otherwise, like, why would he do such a thing? He's not going to rob the guy so blatantly. V'chenim amru lo hamochrim lakona lahatminas hadvarim shekanu v'lo lir'osam begaloi asur liknot mehem mipnei shenikar hadavar shegenevihi masharotzam limkor. But he says, on the other hand, if let's say it's an undetectable amount, then I'm not allowed to purchase from someone who represents himself as a seller on behalf of somebody else. And furthermore, if they say, put it away, hide it, don't tell anyone about it. So then that's your clue that this may be stolen goods.
She's just trying to skim off one or two.
Yeah.
Hoping the only one.
That's right. Now, the next one is a practical halacha, lakachat meha'ochel hanishar b'chatuna, to take some of the leftover food from a wedding. Anashim hamuzmanim l'chatuna u'lemesibas bar mitzvah. Okay, so you're making a wedding or a bar mitzvah in a hall, and you've invited guests. Olisuudas mila v'chol kayotze bazeh, like, right, or to a bris mila meal. Mutlo lakachat lebeito mehamana shehiviu lo kishalo achla. You're allowed to take the portion that they serve you. You can take that home if you want. You can say to the people, do you have a doggy bag or something?
I'll have it to go.
But you can't take the other food that's left on the table. Manot shlemot o shiarei ma'achal shenisharu ala shulchan, ele imkein shoelet bal hasimcha. But you can't take, let's say, a plate of danishes. Let's say you're at a bris, and you see that there aren't that many people there.
They have deep pockets.
So what you want to do is you want to take let me take some of the food that's left over on this table. Chaval, you say, chaval, that it should go to waste. So let me take all of the remaining food that's on the table where I'm sitting, and I'll take it home with me. So what's wrong with that? Maybe the Baal Simcha wants that food. So you'd have to first ask the Baal Simcha, o echad meha achra'im al ha'ulam, or one of the people who is in charge of the hall. V'imboru lo shebemakom shemit areach bo regilim lizrok la'ashba, afilu manot shlemot mima shenishar la'shulchanot. If it's clear to you that the place where you're eating is where they throw the leftover food in the garbage, the stuff that's left over on the tables, mutar lo lakachat misham lebeito o litein la'eza ani mesuyam. You would be allowed to take that food either for yourself or for a poor person. V'chein hadin. So this is not really that well written, I have to say, because first of all, you have to clarify, where does the leftover food go? Does the caterer take all the leftover food, or does he give the food to the person making the simcha? That'll depend upon which person you have to ask permission to take the food. So he says either. I don't think it's either. I think sometimes it could be both. Or maybe it's
One
only
or the
just
other.
what, well, he says one or the other, but I don't know if it's one or the other. I
So-
think a lot of it will have to do with what the arrangement is between the Baal Simcha and the caterer. A lot of times, the caterer has an arrangement where he takes all the leftover food and he distributes it to the poor, or he may recycle some of it if he's got, let's say, another simcha that day.
And many times they put extra, just if you have extra guests, they say they put 10 extra seats. So they put extra food just in case you need it, but you didn't pay for that. So it doesn't belong to the owner of the one who's making the simcha.
Sometimes they use it for shaloshudas or something after like a lunch.
Yeah, or let's say the shul is putting out a kiddush and they want to use the leftovers for shaloshudas. And you say,
Doesn't it also depend on the time that you're at the simcha? Like, I mean, if you're one of the first people there and you decide you want to take a tray at that stage, that's a different story to if you're the last person
Right.
before you leave.
right, of course, if you're one of the first people, you wouldn't have any rights. You could take your own meal. Let's say you could make a plate for yourself.
Yeah.
And then let's say it's disposable stuff, to make a plate for yourself, cover it up and walk out with it, that's fine. But to take other extra food, that's going to be more problematic. You're either stealing from the caterer or you're stealing from the host. So unless you know for a fact that no one's going to eat that food, they're going to throw it away. V'chein adin biprachim shenishu acharei achatuna imemela omdim lihizarek. And the same thing would be true about flowers. Let's say you know they're going to throw away the flowers. Now, that's not always the case.
No.
I know that one of my kids I married off, I saved a lot of money on flowers because the night before here at the Bayit, a very wealthy person made a wedding with very elaborate flowers. And the florist said, the flowers will stay another day. You're welcome to them. You're welcome to use them. We consulted with the people from the previous day. Can we use your flowers? And they said,
You
sure.
donated the flowers to the next wedding.
Yeah, to the next wedding. So a person can't make the assumption, well, it's already past Sheva Brachas. They're starting to clean off the tables. I might as well take a bouquet of flowers with me. Can't do that. You have to know for a fact that the flowers are going to be thrown away. Let's say you ask a waiter, then you can take them home. Now, I don't fully agree with this. Asking the meltzar, asking the waiter, I hate to say the dumb waiter, you don't know.
He doesn't know.
He's not authorized to give you permission. So there's a lot of things in this paragraph that I'm really not so happy with. But at least it's an illustration of how you have to be careful about Geneva.
And also the bases are not, so most of the time the bases are rental. You rent the bases at the club, so you take the flowers in the base, and then you sell it for somebody else that is giving.
Yeah.
But today, the because of the diet, because of the food laws, they're not allowed to reuse the food different inside the shul, but let's say you have a kiddush and you use it for shaloshudas, it's a different story.
Yeah.
But in most cases, it can't. But a lot of caterers, from what I understand, use what's called second harvest, where they come and pick up the food and it gets distributed
Sure.
to the poor. So how do you don't know if that's.
Well, you have to, that's why I think it's really important to inquire both of the Baal Simcha
I don't think
and
they allow that anymore.
the caterer.
They don't, because worried about poisoning or something, or they don't take responsibility or
So
something.
it's already open food.
Yeah, maybe they don't do the state stop that.
So second harvest doesn't, they only take clothes.
Only for shaloshudas.
I'm quite sure they don't allow anymore because somebody got sick, whatever they're responsible for. Well, what about the sweet table, which is an obvious one, where my wife does, where she takes a lot of stuff home.
Right. So in that kind of situation, it depends how the sweet table is set up. If they set it up as a buffet and everyone can take what they want, I think it's perfectly fine to take a little bit of extra within reason, right? Let's say you want to give to one of your kids, you want to bring home something from the wedding. That I think it's understood, that it's going to be okay to take stuff from the sweet table for that purpose. People all do that, especially because it's buffet style and it's finger food, right? And it's at the end of the meal when people are leaving. A lot of times they'll even some of the simchas that I've been to, they'll put the chocolate chip cookies and on the exit on the way out because they know people want to go home.
Okay.
Seems to me you could take more than just for yourself.
So is that because it's an accepted norm that we can do that?
I think so. I think so.
And also they put bags for you to take.
Yeah,
Oh, that's the case,
that's a
then,
different
yeah.
story.
Yeah.
But for the cookies, yes, but at the dessert table, like sometimes I've wrapped up a couple of extra cakes or something and put it in a napkin.
Okay. Achot beveit cholim.
That takes the cake then.
Oh.
Yeah, like, right, you can't walk off with the wedding cake.
Well, I need a piece. Just one piece.
Yeah, right.
They cut it, I thought they cut it for me.
Yeah, that's right. Here's another shaila. Achot beveit cholim shelokachat ha'ochel hanotar. A nurse in a hospital who takes some of the leftover food. So here's the shaila. Nishanu legabe achot she'ovedet beveit cholim. Mutar la lakachat lebeita mehamanot shenish'aru. Shaharei barur shezorkim otam achar kach lepach kishemachzirim otam lemitbach harashi shebeveit cholim. So the hospital, it's a kosher hospital, right? Because it's in Israel. And they have all of these portions that they have a cart that goes to all of the hospital rooms that they serve to the patients. There's a nurse that says to herself, I know that when a patient, let's say, doesn't take their food, they're going to bring it back to the kitchen and they're going to throw it away. That's what the hospital does. So what I'd like to do is take some of these extra portions, bring them home, and feed it to people who can use it, whether it's my own family or whether it's people in my community. He says, "V'nira ledina shamuter lakachat me'otam hama'achalim shenisharu leveita." He says it seems that would be permissible. Rak shelo litein petach lishar hadivarim yesh le'asor bazeh. But he says, but you can't expand that to other things that you would like to permit. So he says, Eli imkein yishalu et hanhalat beit hacholim azai yiyeh mutar. He says, unless you ask the hospital administration, then it'll be permissible. In other words, let's say there may be other issues, there may be other legal issues involved that the hospital may have policies that do not allow any of the food that has been on the hospital floor to leave the hospital for any number of reasons. So you have to look into that and you have to ask the hospital administration.
So if anybody wants to do hospital food, good luck to them.
You want to know something? You're thinking of kosher hospital food. So, when you have, let's say, Shaarei Tzedek or Hadassah, the food's probably not as bad as it is with when you compared to the food that they serve here.
So that begs a question, like if let's say this nurse, there's a meal that's out there and the patient doesn't eat it because for whatever reason, she's hungry, so she has it herself, then has she stolen if it was going to go to waste from that one person, she ate it herself that night?
Yeah, so she hasn't really stolen. However, there may be other, let's say, you have to verify, he's basically saying you have to verify from the hospital. What policies do they have in place? In other words, if let's say all the hospital workers were going to do that, we're going to use that loophole, then maybe it could lead to starving patients. Oh, you don't want your lunch, do you?
You don't want your lunch today,
Yeah. Ve'ulai hachanami kegon shelokchim chala v'chulei deyesh leze mechir kavua v'yachtimu et kartis ha'avoda lifnei siyum ha'avoda zman ma Ve'ulai lo kulam yodim ve'alu latzeit mizeh chilul Hashem ve'akein sheva al ta'aseh odav. He says similarly over here. So let's say kagon shalokchim chalav. He says, let's say you take a carton of milk with you, and that a carton of milk has a fixed price to it. V'yachtimu et kartisa avoda lifnei siyum ha'avoda zman ma. And then what you do is you clock out earlier in the time that you say that you clocked out. And I don't know why he's connecting the two together.
Trying to say that because you should change them on the time and you took something as well. I don't know. Because I mean, shortchanging them on the time is form of theft as well.
Oh, I think what he's saying is that you're saying to yourself, you know what? I'll pay for the milk that I take, because the milk that I take, maybe they won't throw out. Maybe they'll put back in the fridge. But you know what? I'll take a carton of milk, and then my compensation for that carton of milk is I'll work the extra 5 minutes that carton of milk is worth, and I won't mark it on my clock time of my hours of compensation. Because he says in the parentheses, he says, "Va'ayin masha kasavnu b'inyan litol eze chayfetz umachal mibli lishol et haba'alim kisheyesh lo mot be'ein v'yitain damim keneged masha lokach diyesh matirin bazeh." There are some people who say that if, let's say, you know that an article is for sale and you just leave the money on the counter because the seller's not present, sometimes there are poskim who say that would be mutter. Let's say you decide, you know what, I'll take a carton of milk because I want to drink something on the way home. And what I'll do is I'll clock out, I'll mark down the time that I'm clocking out 5 minutes before I actually finish working. So that way they won't have to pay me. So that'll offset the carton of milk. He says, don't make those kinds of rationalizations, he says, because maybe not everyone will know what you're doing, and it'll just look like you're stealing a carton of milk, and it'll become a chilul Hashem. So the best thing to do is to consult with the hospital administration if you want to be able to do this kind of shtick. Okay. All right. So this is sort of like an interlude of a couple of different shilas having to do with subtle issues of Geneva. Let's go back to the standard halacha. Hahevdel ben gazlan leganav le'inyan tashlumin. What's the difference between a ganav and a gazlan as far as having to pay back what you stole? Ein hevdel ben ganav v'gazlan el inyan tashlume kefel v'tashlume arba'a v'chamisha. So the only difference as far as payment is that a ganav has to pay either double or 4 to 5 times the amount, and a gazlan only has to pay back the principal. Dahainu shahaganav mishalim pishnai mima shaganav v'hu nikra tashlumei kefel. When a ganav steals a widget from somebody and he wants to pay it back, so remember, he's stealing by stealth, okay? So that you have to pay double, okay? So he's got to give back the widget plus pay the value of the widget. V'tashlumei arba'a im ganav se utavacha o mecharo mishalim arba'a pa'amim kenegda. If you steal a sheep and then you don't have the sheep anymore intact, but instead you sell it or you butcher it, so then the halacha is you have to pay 4 times the value of the sheep. If the sheep, let's say, cost $100, you've got to pay $400 for that sheep. V'tashlume chamisha im ganav shor utavacha o mecharo mishalem chamisha pe'amim keneged hashor sheganav. He says, what's the 5 times? That's if you steal a bovine animal, let's say a bull or a cow, and you butcher it or you sell it. So you have to pay, let's say the cow is $1,000 a head. So if you steal a cow and then you slaughter it, you have to pay 5 times, $5,000. Uvizman hazeh ein based in govim lo kefo v'lo arba v'chamisha elarak isma sheganav. But that's only in the times when Beis Din would collect knas. Nowadays, the Beis Din doesn't collect knas, does not collect penalty payments. This is even anything that's post-Talmudic. There's no imposition of these kinds of fines. So there is no difference nowadays between a robber and a stealer and a thief. In both cases, you pay the amount that you stole. Okay. Geneva me avivo imo o karova. So he says sometimes a person can be guilty of stealing from his parents or his relatives. Yesh anashim shenichshalim be'isur geneva umatirin la'atzmam lignov mikrovehem. Sometimes people stumble in this law and they rationalize how it would be okay to steal from their relatives. Kagon ben me'aviv o me'imo, let's say one of my children, o me'achoto, or from my sibling, o isha mi baila, or a woman from her husband, or from, I'm sorry, I'm not stealing from my children. If a child steals from his parents, or from a sibling, or a wife stealing from her husband, it's important to notify these people that what they're doing is usher. And you have to remedy that situation either by paying back what you stole or getting their express forgiveness of what you stole. Now, in the footnote, he says, let me just see if there's any specific examples. No, there's no specific examples over here. But it's important to remember that stealing is still stealing, even though it's your parents' money. A child may say, well, my parent pays for all of my needs, so I can just go into my mom's purse and take extra money. That's stealing. Next, Misha Gazlu Mimenu Sikum Kesef Ein Lo Edim Al Kach V'Shakach Etzlo Hagazlun Chayfetz Sheshavyu Karov L'Sikum HaKesef Shenigzal Mimenu. So let's say you know somebody stole from you an item that's worth, let's say, $10. And for whatever reason, the guy that stole from you that item that's worth $10 has left something of his with you by accident. Now, and the you're not going to be able to, or it's not practical for you to take the thief to Beis Din, right? The guy that stole the $10 item from you, you're not going to take him to Beis Din for it could be any number of reasons, either because $10 it's not worth it to, the Beis Din's not going to hear the case, or you don't have witnesses, or whatever the situation is. So then in that kind of situation, mutter l'nigzal lito l'sachefetz la'atzmo o l'mochro t'murs kaspo shegazlo mimenu. Then it would be permissible under certain conditions to take the item that the Gazlan left at your house and use it as compensation for what he had previously stolen from you.
The Goslin knows that he left it there, or
He forgot it. No, he forgot it.
Okay,
I'm
it's
just-
not gonna call an issue if he just keeps it.
So how,
So he doesn't even need to return it. He just keep it.
but how do you know the Gosling hasn't made it hefker?
He probably hasn't made it hefker. It's a great question. He hasn't made it hefker.
He's made it hefker, then you have to really take it for that.
He says, so there's a difference. The Gemara says you're not allowed to go into your friend's house and confiscate items from him, right? As payment for what he owes you. That you're not allowed to do. But this is different because it's already in your possession. So when a guy left something in your possession, you're allowed to use it as collection on what he already owes you for prior theft. It could be even for a debt, but we'd have to see what the parameters of this are.
So now, if you tell us in the phone, then this thing could be able to come back, you know, you should pay it back.
Okay. Now, what is on what kind of items do I violate the prohibition of stealing? Kol hagone v'mamon mishava pruta v'mayla over alisir lo saser shnemer lo tignova. Anything that is above the value of a shava pruta, you're liable for stealing. Ve'ein lokin alav zeh sheharei nitin l'tashlumin, but you never get malchus for such a violation, because the Torah says that restitution is the penalty. Shahaganav chivaso Torah l'shalim. V'yesh omrim she'ein lokin alav zeh lefishu hu lav hanitak la'aseh. Some say that this is a classic example of a negative commandment where the remedy for that negative commandment is written explicitly in the Torah. V'yesh mi she'omer kishem shahagozel over al shlosh alavin lo tigzol v'lo tachmod v'lo titaveh, kach haganav over b'shlosh alavin elu shariafu chamad v'yitaveh. So there is an opinion in the Gemara that whenever you rob from someone, you don't only violate lo tigzol, you also violate do not covet and do not desire, okay, which are two other negative commandments. And here too, that would be a violation, but you still don't get lashes for it. Now, with all of that said, that the prohibition only covers a shava pruta, the amount of one pruta, nonetheless, asur lignov kol shehu midin Torah. You're not allowed to steal even a small amount, according to Torah law, lefi shechatzi shir asur min haTorah, because stealing less than a shava pruta, which is what we call chatzi shiur, half the amount, is also prohibited. So, for example, this concept of chatzi shir has applications not only in the laws of theft, but in many halachas. On Yom Kippur, you're not allowed to eat food the size of a date. But chatzi shir says, and if you do, you get kares, okay? Chatzi shir law says you're not even allowed to eat half of a date amount on Yom Kippur. However, if you do, you don't get kares. So therefore, there are certain leniencies for an ill person, okay? V'yesh omrim sha'asar mipnei shemitzaro avalo mitzad hamamon kevin she'en bo shava pruta. Some say that the reason for the prohibition is not because of this concept of chatzi shir, but rather because anytime you steal from someone, you're causing them anguish. And the anguish that you cause to someone is going to be prevalent even when you steal something that's less than a shava pruta. No one likes to be the victim of theft. So that would be the reason why it's prohibited. Okay, well, so we'll hold it here for today.
Does it differentiate between theft and swindling?
No. Swindling is a form of theft. No, it's
understand
just
that.
a more elaborate form of theft. Yeah. So there's no.
Swindling is there's say there was a transaction that occurs with swindling, which